Under the sweltering gaze of a Brooklyn summer, when the city exudes a mix of relentless heat and whispered secrets, an ordinary afternoon morphs into an extraordinary battle of fate and conscience. Imagine a meticulously crafted film set, concrete, walls encasing the bustling activity of a John Wick production, the air heavy with the aroma of hot asphalt and tantalizing hints of street food. Amidst the scattered camera equipment and cables snaking across the ground like dormant serpents, a story of unexpected heroism and eerie inevitability begins to unfold. Keanu Reeves, a man whose very presence seems to command both reverence and empathy, stands at the crossroads between the world of movie magic and stark, uncompromising reality, as the director's voice slices through the clamor with the simple yet resonant words, "That's a wrap, folks." A collective sigh of relief ripples among the crew. Their momentary respite, however, belies the turbulent undercurrents that lurk just beneath the surface, a secret that will soon rattle the calm. The opportunity for escape and rejuvenation presents itself when a friendly voice invites Keanu to join a group headed toward a new deli on Atlantic Avenue. But rather than following the familiar path of camaraderie and food, he makes a deliberate, solitary choice. Instead of joining his colleagues, Keanu's gaze drifts to Buddy, the pit bull whose tired eyes and labored panting reveal the silent toll of the relentless heat. In this seemingly trivial moment lies the spark of an undeniable connection, a bond that transcends the scripted world of film and touches something intrinsically human. With a gentle resolve and an unspoken promise to safeguard that quiet soul, Keanu decides that the walk ahead isn't merely a distraction. It's a lifeline. For within the meandering streets of Brooklyn Heights, where every step echoes with both promise and peril, the fate of an innocent life hangs delicately in the balance. The city itself becomes a character in this unfolding drama. As Keanu and Buddy slip away from the controlled chaos of the set, the sweltering streets offer a canvas painted with light and shadow. The reflective heat shimmers off the pavement, in wavy mirages, hinting at an almost otherworldly atmosphere, a natural stage set for events that are about to veer dramatically off script. It is here, amid the interplay of urban grit and the ephemeral beauty of a city teetering between serenity and strife, that destiny reveals its first coy smiles. Yet, even in this picturesque escape, an undercurrent of mystery pulses. As the duo ambles forward, their journey is punctuated by moments that defy expectation. A public water fountain emerges as a humble oasis among towering motorcycles, and the stark outline of a weathered bar looms ominously in the distance. The bar, known only as Iron and Ash, beckons with its crude sign and foreboding presence. Its very name conjures images of conflict and decay, intensifying the tension in the air. Amid the ordinary sounds of everyday life, the distant rumble of motorcycles creates a rhythmic cadence, a siren call to a darker, more complex reality. Inside this shifting tapestry of urban life, Keanu's internal world churns with both determination and wary apprehension. His mind is acutely aware that beneath the surface of every passing moment, a storm is gathering, a tempest of unresolved grudges, hidden enmities, and the silent cries of the overlooked. The contrast between the simplicity of a dog's need for water and the weight of the dangers lurking nearby amplifies his inner struggle. In that delicate interplay of duty and empathy, he senses an inevitable collision of worlds, the unyielding nature of villainy and the unbreakable spirit of protection. The stage is set not only for a confrontation with visible aggressors, but also for an introspective battle that ravages the soul. As shadows lengthen and the urban heat begins to dissipate into dusk, the unfolding events become a mirror of the human condition, isolated yet interconnected, fraught with peril, yet imbued with the possibility of redemption. Every step Keanu takes with Buddy under his careful watch is a step into the unknown. Every heartbeat resonates with the silent drum of impending conflict and relentless hope. What began as an unremarkable break from filming now threatens to spiral into a dramatic saga, one where the destiny of an animal, the resolve of a man, and the fate of an entire community intertwine in a delicate dance of suspense. There is an almost palpable sense of foreboding, a whisper in the urban wind that promises both danger and a chance for justice. As the streets of Brooklyn heighten the enigma with their flickering lights and muted voices, the duality of Keanu's mission, balancing his public persona with the private, unwavering drive to protect an innocent companion, emerges as the central, beating heart of this cinematic journey. This is no ordinary walk. It is a precipice, a moment suspended between passion and reason, hope and despair. With each cautious step, the tension mounts, and the narrative of a simple day transforms into a story of epic proportions. In the midst of mystery and isolation, amid the backdrop of urban decay and unexpected beauty, lies an invitation, a call to witness the extraordinary power of compassion in the face of adversity. And as the first chapter of this riveting saga opens, viewers are left with a lingering question that echoes through the alleyways and heartbeats of Brooklyn. What remarkable destiny awaits when the ordinary is defied, and a man dares to stand between chaos and care? The film set sprawls across a nondescript corner of Brooklyn Heights, where the rigid geometry of concrete walls traps the relentless afternoon heat and creates a crucible of unyielding energy. Amidst this urban stage, the set for John Wick unfolds with a stark, almost industrial beauty. The very air is thick with the unmistakable scent of hot asphalt, mingled with the alluring aroma of street food from nearby vendors, a sensory invitation that makes one feel as if they've stepped into a bustling New York story. Scattered camera equipment and cables, lying haphazardly like silent props, lend the space an authentic, lived-in quality. It's as if every piece, no matter how small, contributes its own note to an ongoing urban symphony. Overhead, the unforgiving sun beats down on the concrete, intensifying the sweltering atmosphere, and casting long, distorted shadows that play across the set like whispers of a coming tale. The hum of machinery and the clatter of crew members hurriedly preparing their next shot create an ambient murmur that oscillates between the mechanical and the chaotic. Yet, beneath this apparent disorder lies a sense of deliberate artistry, a carefully orchestrated ballet of lights, sounds, and cinematic precision. Then, breaking through the ambient clamor, the director's voice slices across the set, clear and commanding. "That's a wrap, folks. We'll take an hour break and reconvene here for the next shot." The announcement reverberates through the space, instantly transforming the charged energy into a collective moment of relief. Crew members exchange knowing glances as if unspoken words of fatigue and anticipation pass between them. A chorus of relieved sighs ripples through the group, their fatigue momentarily forgotten in the promise of a break. A pause that hints at the relief of stepping away from the relentless pace of filming. In that brief interlude, the air seems to shift. The once chaotic backdrop softens into a temporary haven of calm. The scattered equipment, the tangled cables, and even the oppressive heat momentarily recede into the background as the crew disperses. There's an undercurrent of excited chatter, as clusters of crew members head toward a catering truck or gather near a makeshift canteen, discussing plans for a quick bite at a new deli on Atlantic Avenue. Their voices, light and buoyant for a moment, mingle with the ambient sounds, creating a mosaic of life that is as fleeting as it is genuine. Yet, even amidst this apparent tranquility, there lingers an almost imperceptible tremor, a subtle hint of expectancy that something extraordinary hovers on the horizon. Like the quiet before a storm, the calm set and relaxed voices carry an unspoken promise that what seems ordinary may soon shatter into chaos and revelation. In this delicate balance between routine and the unfolding unknown, the stage is set for a story that transcends the film set itself, a narrative destined to challenge perceptions and ignite passions in equal measure. Amid the lingering hum of the film set, a friendly voice called out, "Hey, Keanu! We're heading to that new deli on Atlantic Avenue. Come join us." The invitation, warm and inviting against the backdrop of a hectic day, floated through the charged air. Yet, instead of succumbing to the allure of a shared break and familiar chatter, Keanu's attention was seized by a quieter, more urgent need. His gaze drifted to Buddy, the pit bull whose presence had graced the set throughout the day. With a gentle nod and a soft smile, Keanu silently chose a different path, one that prioritized the well-being of his four-legged friend over fleeting camaraderie. Buddy, perched in the glare of the relentless summer sun, was unmistakably out of sorts. The pit bull's chest heaved with labored panting, his tongue lolling as if pleading for a reprieve from the oppressive heat. In that moment, the quiet distress in Buddy's eyes forged an unspoken bond between the dog and the celebrated actor. It was a bond that transcended the scripted glamour of the film set, a raw, genuine connection that demanded compassion and care. Keanu's heart, ever attuned to the quiet struggles of the innocent, stirred with quiet resolve. Before setting off, Keanu sought out the dog keeper, a lean, unassuming figure armed with a clipboard and an air of responsibility. "That's all right," the keeper offered in a measured tone. "I can take care of Buddy. It's my job, after all." But Keanu, with a mix of earnestness and gentle insistence, quickly interjected, "I'd like to do it if that's okay. It'd help me bond with him for the upcoming scenes, and I've always been curious about what it's like to share this responsibility, even if it's just for a while." A brief pause passed as the dog keeper considered the request. With a slight furrow of his brow that softened into reluctant approval, he finally agreed. "All right, Mr. Reeves, just be careful. Buddy's a sweetheart, but he can be a handful sometimes." With the keeper's nod of consent, the journey began to take shape. Keanu reached for a sturdy leash and the essential items, a handful of plastic bags and a collapsible silicone water container, handed over by the dog keeper. Every gesture was deliberate, yet tender. As he fastened the leash around Buddy's collar, his movements carried an undercurrent of care that spoke volumes of his inner resolve. With a gentle pat and a murmured, "Come on, Buddy," he signaled that it was time to leave. In that subtle, unspoken exchange, the day's narrative shifted. What began as a routine break from filming now held the promise of a deeper journey, a quiet pilgrimage of empathy set against the sprawling urban landscape of Brooklyn Heights. As Keanu and Buddy stepped away from the film set's chaotic order, the weight of a new, unexpected responsibility settled between them, a promise to share an hour of solace, forging an unbreakable bond in the sweltering heat of an ordinary day transformed by compassion. With Buddy secured gently by his side, Keanu stepped away from the structured chaos of the film set, leaving behind the regimented clamor of lights, cameras, and crew. The controlled environment, so meticulously staged with its concrete walls and scattered equipment, gradually gave way to the unpredictable, unscripted pulse of Brooklyn Heights. Every step felt like shedding the confines of a meticulously choreographed scene and embracing a world that was raw, vibrant, and unknowable. A realm where every street corner promised both familiar comfort and hidden surprises. The duo soon found themselves immersed in the heat and energy of urban life. The scorching sun bathed the streets in a shimmering glow, refracting off the pavement in a dazzling display of wavy mirages. As they walked, the city's relentless rhythm enveloped them. The steady hum of traffic, the distant murmur of conversations, and the occasional blare of a horn created a symphony of everyday chaos, a sharp contrast to the carefully controlled set from which they had just emerged. Here, spontaneity ruled. Every step echoed with the unpredictable cadence of city life, where the boundaries between order and disorder blurred in the ever-shifting interplay of light and shadow. Buddy, still panting from the day's heat, moved with a mix of hesitation and anticipation. His eyes scanned the horizon, as if he sensed that the journey ahead was far more than just a simple walk. Keanu, attuned to every small movement and sound, led the way with measured steps. The duo navigated through the labyrinth of Brooklyn's streets, where every block unfurled a new tableau of urban activity. Shop fronts glowing with neon, hidden alleyways whispering secrets of days gone by, and the occasional burst of laughter from a street vendor calling out his wares. Amid all this sensory overload, the pair moved as if in a quiet bubble, separated from the frenetic pace of the city, yet inexorably drawn into its magnetic pull. Yet, beneath the vibrant hustle of daily life, an underlying note of unease began to weave itself into the fabric of the journey. What had initially appeared as an ordinary departure evolved into a passage into the unknown. The shifting urban landscape, bathed in both intense sunlight and elusive shadows, evoked a subtle disquiet. The familiar textures of Brooklyn's streets, its brick facades, graffiti-tagged walls, and sun-bleached bus stops, took on an enigmatic quality. They seemed to hint at stories untold, as if the very pavement held the ghosts of conflicts past, waiting for the right moment to resurface. In these fleeting moments, every detail of the city, its ambient noise, the distant wail of sirens, the intermittent gust of a cool breeze, conspired to heighten the suspense. The transition was seamless yet jarring. What began as a routine, walk was steadily transforming into an odyssey, laden with an unspoken promise of unforeseen events. Each step carried with it a hint of destiny, a quiet prelude to the extraordinary that lay just beyond the next corner. And as Keanu walked on, his determined pace and the silent support of Buddy beside him spoke volumes. They were not merely crossing physical space, but stepping into a narrative that teetered on the edge of chaos and revelation, poised to redefine their day, and perhaps, much more, in ways they had yet to imagine. As Keanu and Buddy continued their journey through the unpredictable streets, an ominous presence began to dominate the urban landscape. In the distance, looming against the fading light, stood a bar with an aura that screamed danger and defiance. The sign above the entrance, battered by the relentless passage of time, read "Iron and Ash" in weathered, industrial lettering that hinted at a storied past of grit and strife. The establishment exuded an unmistakable toughness. Its facade was a patchwork of rusted metal and peeling paint, punctuated by the low hum of motorcycles revving in unison. The roar of their engines, punctuated by the clatter of leather-clad riders, created an almost primal symphony, a soundtrack to a locale where aggression simmered just beneath the surface. Drawing closer, every detail of Iron and Ash seized Keanu's attention. The parked motorcycles, aligned with surgical precision, stood as silent sentinels in a row, their chrome surfaces glistening under the harsh urban glare. These machines were not mere vehicles. They were emblematic of an unruly order, each bike a bold declaration of the formidable presence of its rider. The structure itself, with its imposing brickwork and scarred metal accents, seemed to radiate an air of suppressed violence. It was as if the very walls had absorbed countless stories of confrontation and defiance, their scars etched into the concrete like the echoes of unresolved battles. In that charged atmosphere, the tactile sensations of the scene overwhelmed the senses. The rough texture of the building's facade, the gritty residue of urban decay clinging to every surface, and the metallic tang of engine oil in the air combined to create a setting that was as foreboding as it was mesmerizing. Every crevice and blemish on the weathered entrance spoke of nights thick with tension and days marked by silent grudges. It was a place that demanded caution, a stark reminder that not all in Brooklyn was as familiar or benign as it might first appear. For Keanu, these first impressions stirred an instinctive warning deep within. As his eyes took in the rugged display of raw power and latent hostility, he felt an immediate, almost visceral reaction, a tightening of his grip on Buddy's leash. His eyes narrowed imperceptibly, scanning every detail of the scene with a critical intensity honed over years of navigating both the glitz of Hollywood and the unpredictable edge of real life. The mixture of the bar's violent aesthetic and the palpable tension in the air conjured a quiet alarm in his mind, a silent message that danger was lurking here, waiting to pounce on any sign of vulnerability. In that fleeting moment, as the harsh reality of Iron and Ash crystallized before him, Keanu's inner resolve was steeled. The unspoken language of menace that the bar communicated did not escape him. Instead, it galvanized his protective instinct. The subtle shift in his demeanor, a guarded pause, a measured breath, and an unwavering focus betrayed his growing awareness that this encounter was no random happenstance. It was a turning point, an intersection between the familiar routine of the day and the uncharted territory of impending conflict. As he prepared to move forward, every inch of iron and ash hinted at the dangerous narrative that was poised to unfold, etching the path ahead with both uncertainty and an undeniable promise of reckoning. Amid the looming threat of iron and ash, a glimpse of unexpected solace emerged like an oasis in the urban desert. Tucked discreetly between a line of formidable motorcycles was a public water fountain, a small, unassuming source of refreshment that radiated quiet simplicity against the backdrop of tension. The cool sheen of the fountain's metal contrasted sharply with the harsh, unyielding surfaces that surrounded it, beckoning Keanu and Buddy with the promise of momentary relief. For Keanu, this discovery was more than just a pause. It was a lifeline. With a subtle, almost imperceptible exhale, he guided Buddy toward the fountain. The ambient noise of revving engines and distant murmurs softened as if allowing nature its moment to soothe the collective nerves. With practiced ease, Keanu retrieved his collapsible silicone water container from his jacket pocket, its smooth surface a reminder of the simplicity he longed for amidst the urban chaos. He deftly pushed the silicone sides out to form a makeshift bowl, filling it with cool water that trickled from the fountain with a rhythmic, almost meditative cadence. Buddy, still recovering from the oppressive heat and the earlier brush with danger, reacted with an eager, almost desperate enthusiasm. The dog's eyes lit up as he approached the water, his tongue lolling in anticipation. In that brief, poignant moment, as Buddy lapped up the water hungrily, the cacophony of the nearby tumult seemed to recede into a distant murmur. The act of quenching a single thirst, of both man and beast, became a quiet testament to resilience in the face of adversity. Yet, even as the immediate tension dissolved into a fragile sense of calm, subtle hints of foreboding slithered beneath the surface. The gentle gurgling of the fountain carried with it an undercurrent of unease, as if the water itself whispered secrets of the darker events that lay ahead. The simplicity of the scene, Buddy's unbridled joy at each refreshing sip, juxtaposed with the grim determination still etched in Keanu's eyes, held a duality that was almost unsettling. It was as if, beneath the veneer of temporary serenity, something silent and ominous lurked, ready to shatter this fleeting respite at any moment. Even in this brief interlude, the urban landscape was alive with unstated warnings. The glimmering water, though a source of comfort, reflected not only the clear blue of the sky, but also the shadowy figures and hushed tensions that danced along the edges of the scene. Every drop that cascaded into the makeshift bowl seemed to underline the delicate balance between calm and chaos, a delicate balance that might tip in an instant. In that space, as Keanu and Buddy savored a transient moment of relief, the promise of normality mingled with the certainty of an impending storm, leaving an indelible impression of both hope and latent peril. Amidst the lingering tension that permeated the urban backdrop, a surprising glimmer of humanity shone through the hardened exterior of the biker community. As Keanu and Buddy continued their cautious journey, a tattooed patron stepped forward from the edge of the scene. His weathered face softened into a rare, genuine smile when his eyes landed on Buddy. "Nice pit bull you've got there," he said in a gruff yet friendly tone that seemed to cut through the surrounding tension. In that simple, unexpected exchange, a bridge was built between two worlds: the wild, often misunderstood biker lifestyle, and the tender, protective nature of a man caring for an innocent creature. This fleeting moment of camaraderie, punctuated by the patter of genuine words, resonated deeply, offering a breath of relief in an otherwise charged atmosphere. Not long after, the entrance of a charismatic waitress further lightened the mood. With a warmth that defied the rough edges of the scene, she approached Keanu and Buddy, her presence as uplifting as a bright ray of sunshine piercing through stormy clouds. Clad in a slightly stained apron that spoke of long, hard days, but carried a touch of resilience and charm, she knelt beside Buddy. "Oh, aren't you just a handsome boy?" She cooed in a tone that blended humor with heartfelt affection, extending her hand for the dog to sniff. Buddy's tail responded immediately, wagging with enthusiastic delight as if to reciprocate the unspoken kindness. Her light-hearted interaction, laced with subtle jokes and gentle banter, transformed the surrounding mood. For a brief moment, the tension seemed to ebb away, replaced by a shared sense of ordinary joy and belonging. Yet, even as these moments of human connection unfolded, the underlying current of unease remained. The soft murmur of laughter and casual greetings, though comforting, played out against the backdrop of a world brimming with latent conflict. While the tattooed patron's kind remark and the waitress's cheery demeanor offered a glimpse into the softer side of life, they did so in stark contrast to the dark energy hinted at by iron and ash just down the street. The ambient noise of the urban landscape, the hum of engines, distant shouts, and sporadic revs of motorcycles, remained. A constant, a reminder that amidst the acts of kindness, an unspoken storm was ever present. As Keanu observed these interactions, a part of him recognized the delicate balance at play. These genuine, brief moments of human warmth were layered atop a foundation of unyielding tension and suppressed hostility. It was as though the community was wearing dual masks, one that embraced compassion and friendly chatter, and another that concealed a readiness for danger should the balance tip. This contradiction did not diminish the impact of the shared smiles and soft words. Instead, it deepened them, highlighting the complexity of life in Brooklyn's streets. In that brief interlude with the locals, the narrative of the day took on a richer texture. The friendly exchange served as a gentle reminder that even in the midst of potential chaos, pockets of kindness could flourish. Yet, the quiet undercurrent of brewing tension ensured that every moment of joy was tinged with caution, a subtle interplay of light and shadow that promised that while good may prevail, its journey would be anything but simple. As the soft laughter and friendly chatter inside the cafe receded into the background, an unsettling disturbance began to emerge, just outside its welcoming facade. The air, which only moments ago had been filled with gentle warmth and shared smiles, now vibrated with the sound of escalating voices, a discordant counterpoint that disrupted the fragile calm. The waitress, whose light-hearted demeanor had so recently brightened the space, now found herself at the epicenter of an abrupt and bitter dispute with a formidable group of bikers. Her voice, usually imbued with cheer, sharpened with determination, as she stood her ground against a barrage of hostile retorts. The bikers, their postures rigid and faces etched with anger, encircled her with an almost predatory intent. Their aggressive stances and the low, menacing cadence of their language painted a stark picture of impending danger. Each word they spat out, laced with contempt and veiled threats, underscored a simmering hostility that permeated the very atmosphere around the cafe. The clash of tones, from the waitress's steadfast resolve to the biker's abrasive sneers, amplified the tension, transforming the scene into a volatile microcosm of urban strife. Amidst the rising cacophony, Keanu's heart raced, torn between the instinct to intervene and the imperative to shield Buddy from potential harm. Every instinct screamed at him to act, to step in and restore the fragile peace. Yet a deeper, more cautious voice within cautioned restraint. He stood on the threshold of a critical decision. Should he risk igniting an already volatile situation by getting involved, or should he prioritize safeguarding his four-legged companion? The internal battle raged silently, as his mind evaluated the unfolding crisis with a blend of concern and strategic calculation. Keanu's eyes darted between the animated confrontation outside and Buddy, who remained by his side, a beacon of vulnerability in the storm of conflict. The pit bull's anxious gaze reflected the rising tension as the volume of raised voices grew louder, echoing with threats and the promise of violence. Every muscle in Keanu's body tensed, a physical manifestation of the inner turmoil swirling within him. His protective instincts clashed with the sobering reality that sometimes stepping back is the bravest act of all. In that critical moment, the decision crystallized. He had to withdraw, if not out of indifference, then out of a tactical prudence, honed by years of navigating high-stakes situations. The risks of becoming entangled in a full-blown melee, a melee fueled by raw, unchecked anger, were simply too great, especially with Buddy's safety at stake. Reluctantly, and with a heavy heart, Keanu determined that the best course was to quietly retreat, to allow the situation to unfold without his direct intervention, while he ensured that his canine companion remained unharmed. With measured steps and a careful glance at the brewing chaos, Keanu gently tightened his grip on Buddy's leash. He cast one final contemplative look at the group of bikers, their faces dark with fury, and then slowly began to distance himself from the escalating conflict. This strategic withdrawal was not an act of cowardice, but rather a calculated decision, a moment of introspective clarity amid the swirling chaos. In stepping away, Keanu silently vowed that he would return when the storm had passed, more prepared to confront the underlying menace lurking just beneath the surface. With the tension of the street still heavy in his mind, Keanu guided Buddy into a quieter enclave of Brooklyn, a tree-lined neighborhood where the urban cacophony softened into a gentle murmur. As they stepped away from the conflict outside, the harsh edges of the concrete gave way to dappled sunlight filtering through lush foliage. It was a welcome respite, a brief escape into a world that felt almost idyllic compared to the charged atmosphere they had just left behind. At the heart of this peaceful enclave stood a charming cafe, its inviting outdoor seating area bathed in the warm glow of the late afternoon sun. Delicate strands of ambient string lights crisscrossed overhead, their soft luminescence weaving a tapestry of comfort and welcome. The table settings, complete with rustic iron chairs and carefully arranged potted plants, exuded an effortless charm that spoke of quieter moments and gentle conversations. Here, in this sanctuary away from the clamor of the streets, the promise of a restorative break was palpable. Keanu paused for a moment at the entrance, taking in the scene before him. The cafe's atmosphere was a blend of casual elegance and understated warmth, a stark contrast to the earlier fury of the biker dispute. The hum of contented murmurs, punctuated by clinking cups and laughter, created a serene backdrop that beckoned both man and dog to pause, refresh, and gather their strength. The scent of freshly brewed coffee and the aroma of pastries mingled in the air, offering a sensory embrace that was both soothing and invigorating. Recognizing the need for solace, and perhaps a brief interlude to process the unfolding events, Keanu decided to step inside. With Buddy patiently trotting by his side, he chose a quiet corner table, one that afforded them a clear view of the soft-lit ambiance outside, yet shielded them from the hustle that lingered at the threshold. As he settled into a worn but welcoming chair, the weight of recent tensions began to lift ever so slightly. Here, amidst the gentle clatter of everyday life, Keanu found a momentary sanctuary, a fleeting peace before the storm could gather once more. In that tranquil pause, Keanu's thoughts churned silently. He knew that the respite was temporary. The urban drama that had trailed him from the film set was far from over. The cafe, with its serene elegance and understated charm, was merely a brief interlude, a calming breath in an otherwise turbulent day. As he sipped his coffee, watching Buddy's tail wag in contentment at the simple pleasure of being in a safe space, a quiet determination began to resurface within him. The soft murmur of conversation and the comforting backdrop hinted at an impending transition, an inevitable return to the challenges lurking beyond these peaceful walls. This moment of calm, carefully savored and yet laced with the promise of what was to come, set the stage for the next unfolding chapter. Keanu's decision to pause here was both an act of self-preservation and a subtle preparation, a brief gathering of strength, reflection, and resolve before he would once again step into the fray of a day that was rapidly evolving from the ordinary to the extraordinary. In the warmth of the cafe's embrace, the future loomed quietly, its shadows lengthening as the day inched toward its inevitable, more turbulent transformation. Inside the cozy enclave of the cafe, Keanu found himself enveloped in a welcome warmth that starkly contrasted with the tension left behind. He settled into a snug corner booth alongside Buddy, whose ever-loyal presence provided a silent reassurance. The interior exuded a comfortable charm. Soft hums of conversation blended with the distant clink of coffee cups and gentle background music that seemed to lull the worries of the day into a temporary amnesia. Friendly patrons, some engrossed in quiet discussions while others tapped away on laptops, added to the sense of normalcy, transforming the space into a haven of everyday respite. At the center of this domestic tableau was Maggie, the ever-cheerful waitress whose radiant smile and genuine warmth set her apart. Approaching with a practiced ease, she greeted Keanu with a friendly "good afternoon" that carried a note of sincere care. Maggie's presence was more than just service. It was the human touch that made the cafe feel like home. She carefully balanced the demands of the bustling environment with an effortless grace that made every guest feel like a cherished part of her extended family. Buddy received gentle pats and whispered compliments that further solidified the growing bond between man, dog, and community. As Keanu perused the menu, the ritual of ordering became a quiet interlude, a moment where the frenetic pace of recent events faded into the background. He placed his order, a robust cup of coffee paired with a hearty steak sandwich, along with a special treat for Buddy. Maggie jotted down the order with a practiced smile, their brief exchange punctuated by subtle nods and soft laughter. The atmosphere was relaxed, conversations floated from table to table, and the murmur of everyday life provided a soothing counterpoint to the earlier discord. Yet, even as the cafe hummed with this gentle cheer, a delicate undercurrent of unease slipped quietly through the room. The relaxed exchanges and amicable smiles carried with them a hidden weight, a silent reminder that calm is often but a brief pause before the storm returns. The soft clatter of utensils and the intermittent laughter of patrons belied the intensity that the world outside still held. It was as if the very air carried a secret, a subtle tension that waited patiently just beyond the cafe's door, ready to shatter the veneer of normalcy at any moment. Keanu, while absorbing the comforting ambiance and exchanging a few light banters with nearby patrons, couldn't shake the thought that the serenity he was experiencing was transient. His eyes would occasionally wander to the window, where the bustling streets of Brooklyn hinted at unfolding uncertainties. In the interplay of warm interior lights against the darkening exterior, he sensed a fragile boundary between safety and impending chaos. This quiet interlude, filled with friendly smiles and casual conversation, served as an essential moment of regrouping, a precious bubble of normalcy before the inevitable return to a world charged with conflict and mystery. In that delicate moment, as coffee aromas mingled with soft music and the gentle companionship of Maggie and the other patrons, Keanu allowed himself to breathe. Yet beneath that effortless calm, his intuition remained alert, a muted echo of the tumultuous events that lay in wait. The cafe was a temporary sanctuary, a fleeting embrace of peace, gently cradling him and Buddy before the next chapter of their turbulent journey beckoned. Inside the cafe, the ambiance of gentle murmur and casual laughter was abruptly shattered. Without warning, a burly man in a weathered biker vest burst into the serene space. His presence cut through the calm like a jagged scar, his voice rising in a torrent of venomous words. He barked out cruel insults at the diners, his tone heavy, with disdain as he sneered at anyone within earshot. The carefree chatter faltered, replaced by a sudden collective tension, as this unexpected interloper cast a dark shadow over what had been a peaceful refuge. In the midst of this unfolding chaos, Buddy, the loyal pit bull who had been quietly sharing in the cafe's fleeting calm, became an unwilling target. As if driven by some unspoken cruelty, the biker swung his boot with reckless force. In one horrifying moment, the boot connected with Buddy's side. The impact was brutal, sending a shock of pain through the dog's small, vulnerable frame. Buddy let out a pained, desperate whimper that sliced through the background noise, drawing immediate and horrified attention from everyone nearby. Faces turned, gasps echoed, and time seemed to slow as the shocking act crystallized before all eyes. For Keanu, the scene ignited an instantaneous surge of primal anger and concern. Without a second thought, he sprang to his feet, the warmth of the cafe giving way to a fierce, protective resolve. His heart pounded in his ears as he lunged toward the source of the cruelty. In that split second, every instinct shifted. There was no time for measured words or calm negotiation. All that mattered was defending Buddy from further harm. Keanu's voice, low and dangerous, cut sharply through the charged air as he positioned himself directly between the wounded dog and the aggressor. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he demanded, his tone a mix of controlled fury and unwavering authority. The biker, momentarily taken aback by the sudden confrontation, paused mid-sneer. His eyes, hard and unyielding beneath, the shadow of his cap flickered with a mixture of contempt and surprised defiance. But even for a moment, his posture did nothing to quell the rising tension. The atmosphere grew heavy as a standoff ensued. The once cozy cafe erupted into a scene of anxious silence, with patrons frozen in their seats and the clatter of utensils diminishing to a low hum. The air seemed to thicken with the impending collision of raw emotion and unbridled aggression. Keanu, every muscle taut with protective anger, reached out to gently check on Buddy, whose pained whimpers further inflamed the situation. His eyes burned with a resolve fueled by both empathy and the need for retribution, a stark warning that he would not tolerate any harm coming to his companion. The biker, regaining his composure, let out a derisive laugh. "Control your beast," he spat, his voice dripping with scorn. "You dare let it show its teeth? Pathetic." His challenge hung in the air like a provocation, daring Keanu to push back further. For a moment, the cafe was a battleground of wills, with Keanu's fierce protectiveness countered by the biker's crude arrogance. Their words, sharp as broken glass, intertwined with the murmur of the crowd's growing unease. As the confrontation escalated, Keanu's expression hardened into one of resolute defiance. His voice, now more measured yet laced with undeniable tension, replied, "Buddy only reacts when provoked. You're the one who hurt him first." The declaration drew a murmur of agreement from a few onlookers, and even the biker's sneer faltered ever so slightly. Still, the hostile energy crackled in the space between them, as palpable as the lingering scent of spilled coffee and bitter smoke. In that charged exchange, time seemed to stretch, capturing every nuance of anger and disbelief. The tension was a tangible force, a delicate balance teetering on the edge of violence. Keanu's unwavering stance, juxtaposed with the biker's defensive posture, set the stage for a confrontation that promised consequences beyond the immediate moment. With Buddy in his protective grasp, Keanu's eyes locked onto the biker, silently warning that any further transgression would not go unanswered. The atmosphere bristled with the weight of unspoken threats, each heartbeat marking the slow, inevitable descent into something far more volatile than a mere spat in a cafe. In that moment, as the eyes of the cafe bore witness to the charged scene, it was clear that the delicate fabric of calm had been irreparably torn, ushering in a critical turning point that none present would soon forget. After the heated confrontation, a heavy silence fell over the cafe. The biker, his fury barely contained, backed away with a final sneer before retreating into the shadows of the bustling street. In the immediate aftermath, the once charged air now simmered with a cautious stillness, a fragile interlude that allowed the gravity of what had just occurred to sink in. Keanu stood rooted for a moment, his eyes fixed on Buddy, who trembled slightly in his protective grasp. Every heartbeat seemed to echo the shared shock and pain between them. Slowly, Keanu knelt beside the wounded dog, his gaze searching for any sign of lasting injury. The expressions on the onlookers' faces were a blend of concern and disbelief, as if they too recognized that this incident was far from an isolated lapse of temper. In that tender moment of reflection, as the chaotic echoes of the altercation faded into a palpable aftertaste of sorrow and anger, the reality of the situation began to crystallize. Keanu's careful inspection of Buddy revealed only minor bruises, a testament to the resilience of the pit bull. But the true damage lay in the unspoken message conveyed by the violent act. The lingering fear in the air was not solely the result of a singular outburst. It was a harbinger of deeper systemic issues. As his steady hand reassured Buddy, Keanu's mind raced through the implications. This was not a random spark of cruelty born from a moment of lost control. It was a calculated act, a deliberate show of power and intimidation meant to assert dominance over those perceived as vulnerable. As the cafe slowly stirred back to life, with murmurs of sympathy and cautious whispers exchanging among the patrons, Keanu found himself grappling with the weight of what this encounter truly signified. The biker's aggression was a mere fragment of a larger, more sinister pattern, a pattern marked by cruelty, disregard for the innocent, and an unsettling readiness to use force to settle scores. Keanu's heart pounded not only with the residual adrenaline of the confrontation, but also with a newfound sense of determination. The act of violence against Buddy had pierced through the veneer of everyday life, exposing the underlying currents of hostility that ebbed and flowed beneath the familiar rhythms of Brooklyn streets. While the immediate threat had momentarily receded, the energy of the encounter clung stubbornly to the air. Shadows seemed to linger longer in the corners of the cafe, and every sound, from the soft hum of a distant engine to the low murmur of conversation, carried an undertone of latent menace. Keanu's introspection deepened as he looked into Buddy's eyes, searching for clues that would help him understand the broader implications of the day's events. It dawned on him that this episode was not an isolated incident, but rather a symptom of a more pervasive issue, a culture of intimidation and cruelty that festers in the underbelly of urban life. The realization was both sobering and galvanizing, prompting him to question how many other innocent lives might be similarly imperiled. As the cafe's ambient light shifted with the slow approach of dusk, Keanu's determination began to steady into resolve. The quiet that followed the turmoil was deceptive, a prelude to events yet to come. With every breath, he vowed that this incident would not pass unnoticed or unanswered. The retreat of the biker was not a conclusion, but a temporary lull, a brief pause in what he sensed would escalate into a broader confrontation. The adrenaline that still coursed through his veins was now channeled into a clear, unwavering objective: to seek justice, to shine a light on the dark patterns that threatened his world, and to ensure that Buddy's suffering was not in vain. In this charged moment of reckoning, the stage was set for what would follow. The fragile peace inside the cafe, with its gentle clinks and murmurs, was a stark contrast to the storm gathering outside, a storm that promised to unravel the hidden networks of cruelty and fear. With a steady, determined gaze, Keanu silently promised that he would unravel this knot of intimidation and cruelty, piece by piece. As he lifted his gaze to the darkening horizon, the weight of the past clash and the ominous promise of future conflict loomed large, forging a path that was as uncertain as it was inevitable. The incident, he realized, was only the beginning, a spark that would ignite a journey toward justice and redemption in a world too often defined by its hidden shadows. In the midst of an uneasy lull that had begun to settle over the cafe, a sudden heartbreaking shift shattered the fragile calm. As Keanu sat quietly, the bond between him and Buddy palpable in every shared glance, an unexpected tremor of crisis unfolded. Without warning, Buddy, who had been a quiet beacon of resilience throughout the day's tribulations, collapsed onto the tiled floor. The movement was so swift and bewildering that for a split second, time seemed to stretch, holding its breath in anticipation of the unthinkable. In that instant, a tidal wave of emotions surged within Keanu, transforming lingering anger into raw, desperate anguish. His heart, still echoing with the remnants of recent confrontation, now thundered with an entirely different urgency, a racing dread that threatened to overwhelm him. The sight of his beloved companion crumpled on the floor was more than a physical collapse. It was an emotional implosion that left him both powerless and determined all at once. Every fiber of his being screamed out in protest as he knelt beside Buddy, his trembling hands reaching out to check for any sign of life. The cafe, which had been a gentle sanctuary just moments before, now bore witness to a scene of frantic distress. The once comforting clink of crockery and murmur of conversations faded into a distant hum as Keanu's world narrowed to the desperate need to save Buddy. His eyes darted around the room, searching for aid, as a surge of adrenaline ignited every movement. "Buddy, hold on," he pleaded, his voice raw and unsteady, filled with a mix of fear and urgency that he had rarely known possible. Realizing that every second could mean the difference between life and death, Keanu sprang into action. His hands, slick with sweat, found the phone with disbelieving speed, and he dialed for help, each ring echoing like a countdown to an uncertain future. In between gasps and whispered pleas, he attempted to assess Buddy's condition, noting the shallow, rapid breaths and the desperate, unfocused look in his eyes. The subtle taste of panic was almost palpable as the chaotic energy of the moment overtook him, and he barked out orders to anyone within earshot, a call for water, for assistance, and for hope. The urgency of the situation was overwhelming. Keanu's voice, both trembling and determined, filled the space as he explained in halting, desperate tones. "Someone please. Help. My dog's been poisoned. We need water now." His words, heavy with the weight of impending loss, captured the frantic heartbeat of a man caught in a race against time. Every second brought with it a palpable tension, as the room seemed to shrink around them, the past moments of anger and defiance, replaced by the chilling sting of imminent danger. Amidst the flurry of motion, Keanu's mind oscillated between panic and a steadfast resolve. Memories of the earlier confrontation, the raw fury directed at the biker, now mingled with an overwhelming fear for Buddy's life. The interior of the cafe, with its cheerful decor and soft lighting, became a contrasting backdrop for the raw emotional turmoil seizing him. Witnesses exchanged worried glances, the warmth of the place momentarily overshadowed by the unmistakable urgency that had gripped the atmosphere. A young waitress, her face etched with concern, hurried over, with a bottle of water clutched tightly in her hands. In one swift motion, she extended it toward Keanu, whose eyes locked onto the precious liquid as if it were a lifeline. But there was no time to measure hope. Every heartbeat seemed like an eternity as he attempted to help Buddy, gently holding the dog's head and trying to coax him to take the water. The cacophony of the cafe faded into a low, strained silence, punctuated only by Buddy's labored whimpers and the soft rustle of desperate movements. In that gut-wrenching span of time, the tone shifted irrevocably. The anger that had briefly fueled Keanu's defiant stance was now replaced by a profound, stinging fear. A fear so deep, it threatened to shatter him completely. As he cradled Buddy's fragile form, the reality of the poisoning settled over him like a dark shroud. He knew that what had seemed like an isolated act of cruelty was part of something much larger, a nefarious undercurrent in the days unfolding. Drama. Now, his world had narrowed to the silent prayer that Buddy would hang on until help arrived, and the desperate hope that this turning point was not the end, but merely the prelude to a fight for justice and redemption. In that heart-stopping, critical moment, Keanu's internal battle raged. Every second counted. Every breath was laced with dread, and every whispered plea carried the weight of a man who refused to let hope slip away. As the aroma of coffee and the murmur of fading conversations surrounded him, the promise of a normal day was now a distant memory, replaced by a struggle for survival, where the stakes were nothing short of life or death. With adrenaline still surging through his veins, Keanu clutched Buddy tightly as he burst out of the cafe. The world around him blurred into a frenzied montage of scorching asphalt and shifting city lights. His mind was focused solely on one desperate goal, the veterinary clinic. Every step echoed like a drumbeat, a primal rhythm pounding in time with his racing heart. The run through Brooklyn was transformed into a high-stakes cinematic chase, a single-minded escape from the clutches of fate. The oppressive summer heat pressed down on him like a tangible force, turning each step into an arduous effort. The pavement beneath his sneakers became a searing track, radiating waves of heat that distorted the cityscape. Sweat beaded on his brow, trickling down his face in rivulets that mingled with the dust and grime of the urban jungle. His breaths came in short, frantic bursts as he navigated the bustling streets, the roar of traffic and snippets of honking horns creating a chaotic symphony behind him. The intensity of the pursuit lent the scene a surreal quality, where every second seemed to stretch into an eternity, yet simultaneously sped by in a blur. Keanu's eyes darted from one landmark to another as he pushed his limits, instinctively, mapping the quickest route through the maze of Brooklyn's avenues. His muscles strained against the relentless pace, but the desperate hope of saving Buddy lent him an extra burst of strength. Each pounding footfall was punctuated by the heavy sound of his heart, a staccato rhythm of determination and fear. In his arms, Buddy lay fragile and vulnerable, his shallow breaths barely audible above the clamor of the city, urging Keanu to keep moving, to not let time slip away. As he maneuvered through crowded sidewalks and dodged inattentive pedestrians, the world narrowed to a singular tunnel of purpose. The relentless urban scenery, towering apartment blocks, graffiti-splattered walls, and flickering street lamps, whizzed past in a dizzying cascade of color and noise. Keanu's mind was occupied with nothing but the urgent need to reach a place of healing. Behind him, the echoes of the earlier violence and cruelty still haunted his thoughts. Ahead, however, lay the promise of salvation. Finally, as if emerging from a long, dark corridor, the welcoming sight of the veterinary clinic materialized on the horizon. Its facade, modest yet unmistakable, shone in the fading light like a beacon of hope. A bright blue cross, proudly emblazoned on the building's exterior, was a silent, reassuring emblem, a symbol that care and compassion awaited inside. The stark contrast of the cool blue against the warm, chaotic hues of the Brooklyn streets stirred a fleeting moment of relief in Keanu's heart. With a final burst of effort, he pushed himself harder, his legs pumping with renewed vigor as the clinic's doors loomed closer. Every step now carried the weight of urgency, the realization that beyond those doors lay the chance to rescue not just Buddy's fragile health, but perhaps a measure of dignity from the day's relentless cruelty. The pounding of his heart reached a crescendo, echoing the silent prayers he offered with each stride. At last, the finish line came into focus. Those same doors, framed by a modest awning, beckoning him with promise. With a final, determined sprint, Keanu burst through the threshold, his arms cradling Buddy as if holding the future itself. Inside, a flurry of activity awaited. Medical staff moved with practiced precision, and the cool, antiseptic aroma of the clinic replaced the heavy, tainted air of the streets. In that instant, the clinic became a sanctuary, a haven where hope was tangible and second chances were possible. Time seemed to slow as he staggered into the reception area, every sense overwhelmed by relief and lingering dread. The blue cross on the wall glowed softly, its presence a soothing counterpoint to the chaos of the outside world. In that moment, the clinic was more than a building. It was a lifeline, a promise of healing. The staff immediately sprang into action, their voices calm and urgent as they ushered him toward an examination room. Keanu's heart, still thrumming wildly, began to ease its frantic tempo as a tentative sense of safety settled over him. Yet, even in this haven, the memory of the desperate sprint and the horrors of what had transpired along the way lingered in his mind. As he was guided deeper into the clinic, his gaze remained fixed on the welcoming blue cross, a constant reminder that hope, however fragile, was still within reach. In that charged moment, as he prepared to face the uncertain road ahead for Buddy's recovery, Keanu clung to the light of that beacon, its promise of care whispering the possibility of redemption amid the lingering shadows of the day. Inside, the sterile sanctuary of the veterinary clinic, a palpable sense of urgency overtook every breath and heartbeat. The moment Keanu burst through the doors with Buddy in his arms, Dr. Harper and her team sprang into immediate action. With professional precision and empathetic haste, the medical staff hurried to the injured pit bull, ushering him into a pristine examination room where every detail was meticulously arranged for crisis care. Dr. Harper, a woman whose calm determination radiated through even the tensest moments, quickly assessed Buddy's condition. Her eyes, sharp and compassionate, scanned his trembling form and noted the shallow, rapid breaths, the unfocused gaze, and subtle signs of poisoning that spoke of a deliberate and insidious act. His pupils are dilated, and the symptoms point to a toxic ingestion, Dr. Harper explained in a measured tone as she delicately probed for signs of further distress. Her hands moved skillfully, checking vital signs and marking the progression of Buddy's condition on a clipboard. Every word she uttered was laden with urgency, and behind her clinical demeanor, the unspoken hope for a miracle flickered. Keanu, standing a few paces away with despair etched on his face, listened intently as he attempted to retrace the horrific sequence of events that had led them here. Every detail, the cruel blow, the sudden collapse, the pained whimpers, tumbled out in a rush as he recounted the bitter reality of Buddy's poisoning. In the backdrop of urgency, the clock ticked relentlessly, each second a heavy reminder of the dwindling window for intervention. Nurses moved swiftly alongside Dr. Harper, preparing treatments with synchronized efficiency. A syringe of activated charcoal was readied to neutralize the poison, while a set of IV fluids and antidotes lay on the counter, waiting to be administered without delay. The clinical hustle was mesmerizing. Monitors beeped steadily, and the soft murmur of focused commands filled the room. The sterile, antiseptic aroma mingled with the tension, creating an atmosphere where every moment counted, and every action was a race against the inevitable collapse of hope. Buddy's condition is serious, Dr. Harper stated as she initiated the treatment, her voice a blend of stark professionalism and muted concern. We need to stabilize him immediately, start him on IV fluids to flush the toxins, and administer the antidotes for the identified agents. With practiced urgency, the nurse attached the IV line, and a drip began to steadily administer the life-saving fluids into Buddy's frail body. The activated charcoal, a dark solution intended to bind the poison, was carefully measured and given its due course, its role pivotal in the ensuing battle against the toxic substance coursing through his system. Throughout this dramatic sequence, Keanu's internal dialogue became a powerful counterpoint to the measured clinical procedures. Amid the rush of activity, his thoughts oscillated between a gnawing despair and a burgeoning resolve. Every precise action of the medical team was punctuated by his silent pleas, wishes for a reversal of fate, hope that Buddy could be saved, and a burning determination that the injustice inflicted on his loyal companion would not go unanswered. As he watched the steady drip of IV fluids and the careful administration of antidotes, a torrent of emotions surged within him. The stark reality that Buddy's life now hung on a thread was both heart-wrenching and galvanizing. Keanu's mind raced as he witnessed the results of the toxic assault. The powerful narcotic mingled with chemicals that mirrored those found in rat poison. The revelation was as chilling as it was clear. This had not been a random act of cruelty, but a calculated attempt to harm. His heart sank with each beep of the monitor, each measured drop of medicine, and each cool clinical step taken by Dr. Harper's team. Yet, amid the palpable despair, a spark of resolve began to kindle. He silently vowed that if Buddy survived this ordeal, justice would be served. The cruelty that had marred their day would not go unchallenged. In the confines of the examination room, time seemed to both stand still and advance with ruthless precision. The relentless ticking of the clock underscored the magnitude of the moment, each second a stark confrontation with mortality. Keanu's thoughts spiraled inward, haunted by the image of Buddy's suffering and the accusatory cruelty of those responsible. Amid his turmoil, however, he also realized that this was a turning point, an inflection point where personal despair could be channeled into a steadfast pursuit for retribution. As the medical team continued their efforts, measuring, monitoring, and executing life-saving procedures, Keanu felt the weight of his responsibility mounting. His eyes, though swollen with worry, burned with a determination that refused to be extinguished by the harsh reality of the poisoning. The clinic, with its clinical rigor and relentless efficiency, was not only a place of healing, but also a crucible where the seeds of his impending quest for justice were sown. In that charged silence, punctuated only by the rhythmic beeps of monitors and the soft murmur of urgent commands, a silent promise took root within him. Buddy's future, and the road to uncovering the truth behind the deliberate poisoning, was now irrevocably intertwined with Keanu's own journey. As he watched the antidotes begin their battle against the toxic onslaught, he silently resolved that no matter how the next moments unfolded, he would stand firm. The healing process might be long and fraught with uncertainty, but in that very uncertainty lay the impetus for a deeper purpose, a purpose that would transform personal loss into a relentless pursuit of justice. In the sterile stillness of the waiting room, time seemed to drag with heavy, relentless determination. The muted hum of distant voices blended with the soft beeps of medical monitors, creating an uneasy symphony that underscored the palpable sense of dread hanging in the air. The antiseptic aroma of disinfectant filled every corner, a constant reminder of the fragility of life in this clinical sanctuary. Here, in the whitewashed walls and dim lighting, Keanu sat alone, the gravity of the day pressing down on him like an invisible weight. Every passing second deepened the silence, inviting introspection and the relentless churn of his thoughts. Keanu's mind replayed the day's events like a relentless montage, the carefree beginning on the chaotic film set, the unexpected bond formed with Buddy, and the cascade of violent incidents that culminated in the shocking poisoning. The memory of Buddy's pained whimpers and the cruelty inflicted by a heartless hand lingered with each shallow breath he took. In that suffocating pause, the echoes of anger and despair mingled with an emerging, more complex realization: the need for justice. Yet, amid the simmering fury, was also a dawning resolve to transform personal trauma into a catalyst for change, a commitment to ensure that such unprovoked cruelty would never be left unchallenged. Within the confines of that quiet room, Keanu wrestled with an internal battle that was as intense as any physical confrontation. A heavy silence filled his thoughts, a silence punctuated by the rapid ticking of a clock that served as a metronome for his conflicted heart. He recalled every desperate moment, the frantic sprint through Brooklyn's sun-scorched streets, the heroic burst of energy as he rushed Buddy into the clinic, and the clinical efficiency with which the team fought against the toxic tide threatening to steal his friend away. Each recollection was a stark reminder of vulnerability, yet also a testament to his own courage. In that reflective void, he questioned the price of retribution. The desire for justice burned fiercely within him, fueled by the betrayal he felt over the deliberate cruelty inflicted upon an innocent life. But as that fervor rose, so too did the creeping shadow of raw vengeance, a temptation to let anger override his measured judgment, to allow the pain to transform into an indiscriminate desire for retaliation. Keanu recognized that the pursuit of justice was a delicate path, one that could easily spiral into unbridled retribution if left unchecked. He was forced to confront an inescapable truth. To honor the memory of what had been done to Buddy, he must resist the allure of vengeance and channel his pain into something that truly mattered. A pursuit of truth and accountability that upheld the values he believed in. Every face in the waiting room, every hushed conversation among those also caught in the grip of uncertainty, seemed to echo the inescapable weight of responsibility. For Keanu, this weight was not merely a personal burden. It was a call to action that extended beyond the sterile walls of the clinic. It was an echo of the broader injustice that permeated the city, a silent demand that someone stand up against cruelty and oppression. As he sat there, his thoughts oscillated between the raw desire to lash out and the deeper understanding that his true strength lay in measured resolve. The quiet environment of the waiting room, with its restrained conversation and somber atmosphere, provided the perfect backdrop for this internal reckoning. In that heavy silence, Keanu made a promise to himself, a commitment to honor Buddy's suffering by seeking justice through calculated, deliberate action rather than impulsive violence. He vowed that his quest would be guided by a sense of purpose and an unwavering determination to bring those responsible to account, while ensuring that the nobility of his mission remained intact. The inescapable weight of responsibility, once a crushing force, now transformed into a steady beacon of resolve. It was a promise that what had happened would not be forgotten, and that through his own actions, he would kindle a spark of change in a world that too often allowed cruelty to flourish unchecked. As the soft light of the waiting room filtered through, touching the sterile surfaces with a gentle glow, Keanu's internal struggle settled into a quiet determination. The reverberating silence was no longer an echo of despair. It was the prelude to a new chapter, one where justice would be pursued with clarity and compassion, paving the way for redemption and a future that honored both the past and the promise of a better tomorrow. Dr. Harper re-entered the room with a measured step that carried both urgency and a heavy resolve. In her hand, she clutched the results from the battery of blood tests, the data that now spoke in stark, undeniable terms. As she approached, her eyes, usually so steady and reassuring, betrayed a trace of somber gravity. "Mr. Reeves," she began, her voice quiet yet forceful. "The test results are in." The words hung in the sterile air like a prelude to an unavoidable verdict. With careful precision, she detailed the findings: a toxic cocktail in Buddy's bloodstream, a lethal mixture of a potent narcotic combined with chemicals typically found in rat poison. The deliberate nature of the substances was clear evidence. She explained that this was not an accidental ingestion, but a calculated, malicious act. For a moment, the room fell into a suffocating silence. Keanu's heart pounded in his chest as Dr. Harper continued, outlining how swiftly the toxins had begun to ravage Buddy's system. The clinical terms: dilated pupils, rapid onset of systemic distress, and trace levels indicative of an engineered poison, only served to amplify the horror of the situation. With each word, the true scale of the cruelty became more apparent. Dr. Harper's voice, steady and factual, delivered the grim news without embellishment, yet it was enough to shatter the remnants of calm that had gripped Keanu moments before. Revelation hit Keanu with the force of a tidal wave. His initial shock gave way to a seething anger that burned deep within him, a revulsion at the thought that someone would deliberately jeopardize the life of an innocent companion. The notion that this act of violence had been premeditated, that every morsel of poison had been chosen with intent, stoked a fire of indignation in his soul. His mind raced back over the day's events, the dark confrontation, the echo of cruel words, and now, the cold, calculated determination behind the poisoning. The pieces fit together in a horrifying mosaic of malice, a picture that left him reeling in disbelief. In that charged moment, as Dr. Harper's clinical explanation receded into the background, a transformation began to take hold in Keanu. The helplessness that had once gripped him like a vice now hardened into an unyielding resolve. He could no longer allow himself to be swept away by despair. The suffering inflicted upon Buddy demanded a response that went beyond shock and sorrow. The pain in his eyes deepened, and a steely determination set in. This act of cruelty would not go unanswered. It was as if a switch had been flicked inside him, igniting a commitment to seek justice that was as personal as it was righteous. Keanu's internal dialogue swirled with a mixture of grief, anger, and determination as he absorbed the full impact of the revelation. In that sterile room, punctuated by the slow, relentless ticking of a nearby clock, he felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. Buddy's life, already hanging in a delicate balance, had become a symbol of something much larger, a clarion call to right a wrong that was as unconscionable as it was unfathomable. The deliberate nature of the poisoning was not just an isolated act of cruelty. It was a sign of a deeper, more pervasive evil lurking beneath the surface, one that needed to be confronted head-on. As Dr. Harper concluded her briefing, the clinical precision of her words was met by Keanu's resolute silence. In that moment of charged quiet, he made a decision, a promise to himself and to Buddy that he would not rest until those responsible were held accountable. The helplessness he had once felt transformed into a determined resolve, fueled by the vivid images of Buddy's struggle and the stark reality of the malicious act. The injustice was now a personal battleground, and with every fiber of his being, Keanu vowed to fight for justice. The cold, unyielding facts laid bare before him sparked in his heart an unwavering promise to turn the sorrow of this moment into a catalyst for change, and to ensure that the darkness of malice would be vanquished by the light of accountability and retribution. The path ahead was shrouded in uncertainty, but in that critical juncture, as the scale of cruelty was laid out before him, Keanu embraced a newfound purpose. Justice, he knew, would no longer be a distant ideal. It would become the mission that defined him from this moment forward. In the quiet aftermath of chaos, as the weight of the day's events began to settle, Keanu found a moment of clarity amidst the clamor of his racing thoughts. With Buddy still fragile from the ordeal, he turned to the steady presence of the dog keeper, a man who had faithfully attended to Buddy throughout the tumultuous day. In that poignant moment, Keanu entrusted the care of his loyal companion to the keeper's capable hands. The gesture was not merely practical, it was symbolic of a profound transition. By delegating responsibility, Keanu acknowledged that while Buddy's survival depended on immediate tender care, his own path was now clear, a journey of relentless pursuit for justice. As he handed over Buddy's leash, Keanu's eyes met those of the dog keeper in a silent exchange of understanding. "Please, take good care of him," Keanu said quietly, his voice heavy with both sorrow and unyielding determination. The keeper, nodding with a mix of empathy and resolve, accepted the solemn charge as if it were a precious trust bestowed upon him. This simple transfer of responsibility marked the moment when personal loss transformed into a decisive turning point. It was as though, by ensuring Buddy's safety, Keanu could finally turn his focus outward, toward the very perpetrators of the cruelty that had shattered their day. No longer bound solely by the immediate need to protect his companion, Keanu felt a surge of purpose rising in his chest. With Buddy now in safe hands, he stepped away from the clinical confines of the waiting area and into a new reality, a reality where the call for justice grew louder with each passing second. Within him, the seeds of retribution began to germinate, fueled by a burning need to ensure that the deliberate act of poisoning would not be dismissed as a mere aberration. The image of Buddy, vulnerable yet resilient, haunted him as a constant reminder of the cruelty inflicted and the lives forever altered in its wake. In the quiet solitude that followed, Keanu's internal dialogue became a manifesto of resolve. He recalled the harrowing moments, the heart-wrenching collapse, the frantic sprint through Brooklyn's relentless heat, and the cold, clinical certitude of Dr. Harper's report. All of these experiences coalesced into a single, irrefutable truth. This was not an accident, but a calculated assault on innocence. As this realization sank deep into his bones, the helpless despair he once felt began to transmute into fierce determination. There, in that stark, oppressive stillness, a promise was forged, one that would propel him into the next phase of his personal crusade. Stepping away from the waiting room, Keanu felt the inexorable pull of duty, a duty not just to Buddy, but to every soul that might have suffered in silence. The burden of responsibility, far from weighing him down, became the very fuel that ignited his resolve. Every beat of his heart echoed with the unyielding promise of action. He visualized the web of cruelty that had ensnared the day's events, and in his mind, each piece of that dark puzzle began to fall into place. The individuals who had inflicted such pain would be found, confronted, and held accountable. Justice, in all its unflinching rigor, would no longer be a distant ideal but a tangible reality. As he prepared mentally to step into this broader conflict, Keanu made a solemn vow, a promise that would serve as the rallying cry for every action he was about to take. With quiet intensity and a gaze that burned with determined resolve, he whispered to the still, solemn air, "I'll be back." Those 3 words, simple yet profound, carried the weight of his commitment, a promise that he would return, not as a defeated soul, but as a relentless seeker of justice. In that final, silent pledge, the path ahead, though fraught with danger and uncertainty, shone with the possibility of retribution and redemption. In that charged turning point, the chapter of sheer survival gave way to one of unyielding purpose. Keanu's promise to return was more than a fleeting vow. It was the embodiment of his transformation, a metamorphosis from victimhood to vigilant protector, from despair to a fiery pursuit of truth. And as the corridors of the clinic quieted around him, that promise resonated like a beacon in the murk of injustice, heralding the dawn of a new battle, a battle that he would fight with every ounce of his being. Under the gathering dusk, Keanu's purposeful steps led him back toward Iron and Ash, the notorious bar where the day's torment had all begun. Each stride was heavy with resolve as he retraced the path that had taken him from the ordered chaos of the film set, through the unpredictable avenues of Brooklyn, and back into the very heart of the storm. The familiar concrete underfoot echoed the memory of earlier violence, a constant reminder that every corner of this urban landscape bore witness to pain and cruelty. Though the day had tested his limits, Keanu now moved with the steady determination of a man who had tasted both despair and hope, and who was now ready to confront the darkness head-on. As he advanced, the waning light of the evening cast long, distorted shadows across the street. The fiery glow of the setting sun draped the skyline in a surreal, almost cinematic palette of blood red and deep violet, amplifying the burden of the day's events. Every building seemed to carry its own secret, every flickering street lamp, a silent witness to past transgressions. The notorious bar, Iron and Ash, loomed ahead like a monolithic relic of past misdeeds, a place etched with the scars of countless confrontations and whispered grudges. Its weathered facade, marred by years of neglect and defiance, took on a sinister quality under the dimming skies, its crude signage and battered windows casting eerie reflections on the rain-slicked pavement. Keanu's heartbeat throbbed in time, with the rhythmic steps of his determined walk. With each step drawing him nearer to the bar, the memories of earlier cruelty resurfaced with undeniable clarity. The cruel boot, the shocked gasps, and the anguished whimpers that had haunted him. All day, the emotional weight of these recollections mingled with the tangible chill of the evening air, creating an atmosphere thick with both foreboding and simmering anticipation. As he neared the bar, the distant rumble of motorcycles still echoed, faintly in his ears, a reminder that the forces of recklessness and malice were never far behind. In that charged moment, as Keanu approached the entrance of Iron and Ash, the world around him seemed to contract, the noisy bustle of Brooklyn fading into a tense, almost expectant hush. The air grew heavy with the scent of damp asphalt and lingering smoke, a pungent mixture that hinted at both decay and danger. His eyes, burning with determined resolve, scanned the area as if to commit every detail to memory. The dim glow of neon signs reflecting off puddles, the relentless hum of the city that masked unseen threats, and the dark silhouettes of figures lingering near the entrance. Every nuance of the setting spoke of impending confrontation, setting the stage for a final reckoning. The atmosphere was electric. Even the fading light conspired with the shadows to create an environment that was both ominous and strangely poetic. Keanu slowed his pace as the bar's facade came into sharper focus, its cracked brick and iron framework a symbol of the entrenched hostility that had sparked his inner revolution. A palpable tension coiled around the entrance, as though the building itself anticipated the moment of retribution. In that instant, every instinct, every memory of pain and loss, steeled him for the confrontation that was about to ignite. There was a certain stillness, a pregnant pause in the air, as if the entire neighborhood were holding its breath in anticipation. Now, on the threshold of the scene that had spawned the day's darkest moment, Keanu felt the old fire of purpose kindle anew. The final confrontation was not a mere act of personal vendetta. It was an imperative, born from a deep-seated commitment to prevent further cruelty. With the determined set of his jaw and the resolute glint in his eyes, he prepared himself to step forward and face the antagonists who had orchestrated this cascade of violence. The darkened entrance of iron and ash beckoned him, promising a clash of wills that would decide not only his own fate, but that of every soul who had suffered in silence. As the last vestiges of daylight dissolved into the night, the stage was set for the inevitable collision, a moment when justice and retribution would finally find their voice in the midst of Brooklyn's relentless shadows. Under the cool cloak of darkness, Keanu stepped forward into a charged clearing outside Iron and Ash, where a hostile crowd of bikers had gathered. The murmurs of their conversation and the low rumble of motorcycles filled the air, and every step he took exuded a blend of apprehension and cautious bravery. His heart thundered with every measured stride, and his eyes, sharp and unyielding, narrowed as he moved closer to the circle of aggressors. The crowd's hostile stares and surly postures made it clear that they were wary of an intruder disrupting their dominance. Yet Keanu's resolute expression and the quiet strength in his bearing spoke of a man unwilling to cower before intimidation. As he approached the group, the tension in the air thickened almost palpably. It was then that a moment of recognition flashed across the murky faces in the crowd. A particular biker, whose hardened gaze and distinctive scar, marked by cruel misdeeds, locked with Keanu's. This was the man responsible for the heartbreaking ordeal inflicted upon Buddy. In that electrifying instant, the entire atmosphere shifted, and the onlookers fell silent, as if anticipating the collision between two immutable forces: the measured determination of Keanu and the unrestrained ferocity of the biker. The confrontation began in earnest. Keanu's voice cut through the oppressive silence, calm, yet carrying a hint of steely resolve. "I'm here to set things right," he declared, his tone icy and deliberate. The biker's eyes flashed with contempt as he responded, voice dripping with sneer and anger. "And what makes you think you can do that, celebrity? You're no match for us." The words, sharp as broken glass, were met by an equally measured reply from Keanu. "Justice isn't about muscle, it's about accountability," he countered, each syllable precise and unwavering. Their words rang out in the cool night air, a battle of wills where rhetoric collided with raw aggression. All around them, the hostile crowd's energy swelled. Murmurs of agitation and subtle shifting took on a life of their own, and the tension mounted with every exchanged glance. The biker responsible, still reeling from the memory of the cruel blow that had wounded Buddy, sneered as he spoke. "You think your little apology or your pretty words can undo what happened?" His retort, full of venom and wounded pride, vibrated against the silent challenge that Keanu's presence posed. Keanu's reply was measured, but cutting. "It's not about undoing the past," he said steadily, his eyes locked on his adversary. "It's about ensuring that such cruelty has consequences." The challenge hung in the space between them, thickening the charged atmosphere with the promise of retribution. Every word was an unmistakable declaration of resolve, a promise that the injustices of the day would not fade into oblivion. Even as the biker barked out another furious insult, the surrounding crowd began to shift, the earlier bravado giving way to uncertain murmurs. They could sense the electric intensity in Keanu's presence, a commitment that had the power to dismantle their hardened demeanor. The verbal sparring intensified, a cinematic duel of words and wills. Keanu's cool, unruffled tone contrasted sharply with the biker's increasing belligerence. "Your actions have consequences," Keanu repeated, the conviction in his voice resonating with every onlooker. The biker's response was a roar of defiance, his words crude and laced with an attempt to reassert control over the situation. "Coward! You're nothing but a pretty face. Your owner's film can't save you now," he spat out, trying to belittle Keanu's resolve. But, with each insult, Keanu's silence grew more formidable. His calm not only illustrated his inner strength, but also underscored that his mission was far more than personal pride. It was about ensuring justice for Buddy and every innocuous soul wronged by their cruelty. The heated dialogue reached a crescendo as the bikers' retorts began to falter under the relentless force of Keanu's measured defiance. The tension was so thick that even the night seemed to pause in anticipation. With a final, piercing look that spoke of both resolve and sorrow, Keanu delivered the ultimatum. "You'll have a lot of time to think about why you thought it was acceptable to harm an innocent creature. Justice isn't a favor, it's an obligation." His words, both a threat and a promise, reverberated in the silent void, forcing the biker to momentarily lower his gaze. In that charged moment, the intensity of the confrontation was undeniable. The hostile crowd, witnessing the clash between two diametrically opposed forces, recoiled as the biker's aggressive posture began to crumble under the relentless weight of Keanu's unwavering determination. Gradually, the defiant sneer on the biker's face gave way to a reluctant, pained acknowledgement of defeat. With a dismissive snarl and a final glare, he signaled his retreat, stepping back as if to preserve the fragile remnants of his pride. His departure was not triumphant. It was a quiet withdrawal, laden with the unspoken promise that the encounter had not ended the conflict, merely postponed the inevitable reckoning. The air slowly cleared as the biker and his cohorts melted back into the shadows of the night. For a brief, charged moment, the echoes of their confrontation lingered, a testament to the transformative power of resolute justice in the face of unmitigated cruelty. Keanu, standing firm amidst the dissipating tension, held his gaze not in triumph, but in solemn assurance. His measured, courageous stance had left an indelible mark, a declaration that the actions witnessed this night were only the beginning, and that those who perpetrated such cruelty would carry the weight of accountability. The encounter, cinematic in every detail, had sealed a promise in the dark. Justice had been demanded, and it would be pursued relentlessly until every wrong was righted. As the confrontation outside Iron and Ash reached its tense apex, the night erupted into an orchestrated display of authority. Without warning, the sharp sounds of sirens sliced through the murmurs of the hostile crowd. Blue and red lights danced across the faces of bystanders, and within moments, a fleet of police vehicles screeched into view. The arrival of the authorities was a well-choreographed invasion, their synchronized efficiency immediately cutting through the charged atmosphere like a scalpel through tension. Officers spilled out of the vehicles with purposeful precision, their uniforms crisp, and their expressions steeled for the task at hand. Inside the bar, chaos quickly followed the arrival of law enforcement. The familiar din of clanking glass and gruff voices transformed into a frantic scramble as patrons darted for cover and bikers instinctively braced for a final confrontation. The officers moved methodically, sweeping through the venue with practiced ease. Their coordinated actions were like a finely tuned operation. One unit secured the exits while another meticulously combed through the interior, gathering evidence and detaining anyone who proved to be a threat. In the murky light of the bar, the chaos was punctuated by the rapid shouts of commands, the clatter of cuffs snapping shut, and the murmurs of witnesses, all blending into a chaotic yet strangely organized symphony of justice. Each officer operated with unwavering resolve. They collected stray fragments, a discarded piece of fabric, a smudge of blood on a battered motorcycle, and documented every detail, their eyes scanning for the smallest traces that could tie the bikers to the acts of cruelty. A methodical sweep ensued. Tables were overturned, and the officers combed through the debris as they took statements and secured any evidence that might later serve as a testament to the violence of the night. The aggressive crowd, now intimidated by the certainty of law, fell into line as they were escorted to waiting police vehicles. Keanu, standing on the fringes of this unfolding scene, watched everything with a turbulent mix of emotions. From his vantage point just outside the bar, he felt a profound sense of relief wash over him as order was restored. The erratic clash of aggression and raw hostility began to give way to a disciplined cadence, a clear, deliberate message that the chaos of unchecked cruelty had its price. Yet, beneath that relief lay a stubborn sting. The vivid images of the altercation, the savage boot, the shock on Buddy's face, and the bitter words exchanged, remained indelibly etched in his mind. He observed as officers methodically took control of the space, their movements deliberate and laden with purpose. The meticulous gathering of evidence and the arrests of key figures reinforced the notion that justice was being served, albeit with the precision of a scalpel rather than the chaos of brute force. The scene before him was clinical, almost dispassionate in its execution, a stark contrast to the visceral emotions that had fueled the confrontation moments before. Yet, the efficacy of the police presence was undeniable. It was a promise that the day's brutal events would not be left unresolved. From his distant perch, Keanu's eyes flickered between the receding forms of the detained bikers and the officers who moved like silent sentinels. In that reflective space, he allowed himself to feel a brief, bittersweet relief, a moment of calm amidst the swirling remnants of injustice. The structured efficiency of the police operation provided a semblance of closure, a concluding note to the day's violent overture. However, as he watched the disciplined procession of evidence being collected and suspects being guided away, a lingering sorrow and a flicker of unresolved anger stirred within him. He recognized that while the immediate threat was now contained, the echoes of the night's brutality had not yet been extinguished. The meticulous police sweep had brought order back to the scene, but it had also laid bare the undercurrents of a much larger conflict, a conflict that would haunt him long after the sirens faded into the distance. As the flashing lights subsided and the bar's doors closed behind the departing officers, Keanu stood in the cool embrace of the night, caught between the satisfaction of justice served and the bitter aftertaste of cruelty witnessed. The scene. Around him was a tableau of restoration, a momentary truce in a battle that was far from over. In the quiet that followed the rapid, methodical intervention of law enforcement, Keanu's gaze hardened with a renewed determination. The events of the night, though temporarily corralled by the steady hands of the police, had sown the seeds of a deeper personal mission. For now, as he absorbed the ordered aftermath of chaos, he resolved that this was not an endpoint, but a precursor, a necessary step in a long journey toward restitution and lasting change. After the tumult of the night, Keanu returned to the veterinary clinic with a cautious yet steady stride, a silent acknowledgement that the immediate threat had finally been contained. Outside, the city had begun its slow exhale as the flashing blue and red lights of police vehicles receded into the distance. Now, within the cool, antiseptic embrace of the clinic, a calm and measured tranquility replaced the chaos of earlier hours. The atmosphere was subdued, tinged with relief, a quiet aftermath of law enforcement's decisive intervention. In this space of order and care, Keanu felt a tentative closure settle over the events that had shattered his day, even as the memory of violence lingered at the edges of his thoughts. As he re-entered the examination area, Dr. Harper greeted him with a subtle yet reassuring smile. "Good news, Mr. Reeves," she said softly, her voice a gentle anchor amid the residual tension. "Buddy is stabilizing. The antidotes and IV fluids are taking effect, and his vital signs are beginning to normalize." Her words came with the clinical clarity of someone who had seen too many emergencies, yet she spoke with a warmth that betrayed her genuine concern for the animal's well-being. Keanu listened intently as she detailed the progress. Buddy's heart rate had slowed to a steadier rhythm, his breathing was more regular, and the toxic cocktail in his system was steadily being flushed out. Dr. Harper's careful reassurances began to stitch together a fragile hope amidst the lingering despair. In that moment, as the sterile lights reflected off polished surfaces, Keanu found himself drawn into a silent, tender space with Buddy. He knelt beside the recovery area, where the pit bull lay resting on a soft bed with a few monitors softly beeping in the background. With gentle hands, he ran his fingers along Buddy's fur, feeling the slight tremor that spoke of both pain and the enduring resilience of life. A subtle smile touched his lips as Buddy lifted his head, his eyes slowly filling with a hint of recognition and trust. In that delicate exchange, Keanu's whispered words of reassurance mingling with the quiet, grateful response from Buddy, the weight of the past hours began to ease. It was a moment of profound bonding, where the fractures of a painful day were momentarily mended by the simple, pure connection between man and his four-legged friend. The relief was palpable, though it did not wash away all the shadows. Conversations with the staff, brief nods of acknowledgement, and the soft murmur of routine activity in the background wove together a scene that signified a return to normalcy. Oh, normalcy that was still fragile, yet deeply cherished. Keanu absorbed every detail. The reassuring tone in Dr. Harper's voice, the gentle efficiency of the nursing staff, and the subtle glimmers of hope in Buddy's slowly brightening eyes. Looking ahead, Dr. Harper outlined a careful roadmap for Buddy's continued recovery. "We're going to keep Buddy under observation for the next 24 hours, she explained. "And once his condition stabilizes further, we'll transition him to a regimen of medications, antidotes, anti-nausea drugs, and liver protectants to support his system as it heals. We'll also need him to stick to a special diet to aid his recovery." Her meticulous planning painted a clear picture of the road to recovery, a path that, though fraught with the natural ups and downs of healing, held a hopeful promise of full return to health. Keanu listened, his mind already mentally noting each step of the plan, each carefully considered precaution designed to ensure Buddy's long-term well-being. In that serene interlude, as the afternoon light filtered softly through the clinic's windows, Keanu allowed himself a brief moment of introspection. The ordeal had been harrowing, leaving deep emotional scars and a lingering fervor for justice. Yet in the gentle rhythm of recovery unfolding around him, there lay a promise of renewal. A promise that even in the aftermath of cruelty, love, and care, had the power to mend and revive. With a resolute nod, Keanu silently committed himself to be there for Buddy, not just as a protector in times of crisis, but as a constant guardian through every step of the healing journey. In that quiet embrace of reassurance, the path ahead, though still uncertain, shimmered with the quiet hope of a new beginning. Keanu's phone buzzed insistently as he stepped aside into a quiet corridor of the clinic. Glancing at the screen, he recognized the film director's name, the voice from earlier that day, which had once filled him with equal parts routine professionalism and creative resolve. With a deep, steadying breath, he answered the call, prepared to convey the unforeseen setback that now threatened the film's tightly choreographed schedule. "Hey, it's Keanu," he said quietly, his tone carrying the weight of what had transpired. Almost immediately, the director's voice crackled in response, a mixture of concern and frustration woven into his words. "Keanu, what's going on? We just wrapped, and now there's this delay?" The question, though casual, held an undercurrent of expectation about the continuity of their production. Keanu took a brief pause, his mind still reeling from the night's harrowing events, before explaining with deliberate clarity, "There's been an incident. Buddy was poisoned. It's serious. I've had to rush him to the clinic." His words, though sparse, hit hard, disrupting the director's smooth cadence with a reality far graver than any mere scheduling hiccup. The silence on the other end was palpable for a moment, a brief pause where cinematic gravity and raw, personal concern collided. The director's tone shifted from irritation to empathetic understanding as he absorbed the news, albeit reluctantly. "Buddy? Are you saying this isn't just a minor delay?" he asked, the urgency of his inquiry underscored by his professional awareness. "I mean, our crew is on standby, schedules are set, but..." He hesitated. Well, nothing is more important than getting him fixed up. The dialogue, though measured, revealed an inevitable conflict between industry realities and personal priorities. While the film crew fretted over delays, Keanu's mind was already firmly anchored to Buddy's well-being, his focus unwavering in the face of the director's logistical concerns. "I understand the disruption," Keanu replied, his voice resolute yet laced with a trace of sorrow. "But Buddy's health comes first. We can't compromise his recovery for a shooting schedule." The words resonated with a quiet authority, a declaration that personal responsibility and humane care had to outweigh even the most pressing professional commitments. The director sighed, and after a moment of thoughtful silence, he conceded, "All right, Keanu. We'll reschedule the scenes. The production can wait until Buddy is back on his paws. I've spoken to a few of the team. They agree that nothing beats the well-being of our cast, animal or otherwise." There was a soft murmur of relief on the other end as the director outlined tentative plans to adjust the shooting sequence, shifting scenes that required Buddy to later in the week while advancing others that didn't depend on his presence. The conversation slowly unfolded with pragmatic notes, detailing adjustments and logistical recalibrations that were both necessary and humane. Through this dialogue, a broader narrative emerged, one that touched on the often overlooked realities of working with animal actors. Keanu, with his unwavering commitment, had inadvertently sparked a discussion on the treatment and respect deserved by these vulnerable co-stars. "It's more than a scheduling issue," he remarked quietly. "It's about caring for those who share our craft. Buddy isn't just part of the film. We're his family, and his safety is our responsibility." His words carried a quiet fervor, one that resonated with deeper industry ethics and a call for higher standards of care. The director's response was reflective, acknowledging that perhaps this incident could serve as a turning point, a reminder that the well-being of animal actors must always come before rigid deadlines. "You're right," he admitted. "We've got to ensure our practices are as respectful as they are professional." There was a shared, unspoken understanding that the ordeal had shifted perspectives, not just for Keanu, but across the production. In reconnecting with the film crew, the conversation had evolved from scheduling logistics to a broader affirmation of professional responsibility and human decency. As the call ended, Keanu felt a weight lift off his shoulders. The crisis had forced a reevaluation of priorities, and in doing so, had sown the seeds for a culture of greater care and respect within the industry. With a quiet resolve, he prepared to rejoin the team, carrying with him the dual promise that Buddy would be recovered first, and that no matter the cost, justice and compassion for those who depend on us would always come first. Night had fully descended by the time Keanu began his reflective journey back to the hotel. Each step he took along the familiar sidewalks of Brooklyn Heights felt heavy with the memories of a day that had shifted his very core. The once vibrant city now wore a contemplative hush, as if in reverence to the dramatic events that had unraveled earlier. Every footfall resonated with a rhythmic echo, capturing the weight of loss, anger, and hope intermingled throughout his heart. As he walked, Keanu's mind replayed the day's unfolding, like an intricate film reel. Each scene etched into his memory, the chaotic energy of the film set, the unexpected bond formed with Buddy, the brutal act of cruelty at the cafe, and the desperate sprint to the clinic all converged into a singular narrative of transformation. His inner dialogue swirled with introspection and raw emotion. He realized that what he had witnessed was more than a series of unfortunate events. It was a profound awakening of his sense of duty, justice, and compassion. No longer was his role limited to that of a celebrated actor. He had become a guardian in a moment of vulnerability, and in that role, there was both great sorrow and an even greater calling to act. The shadows of Brooklyn Heights stretched long, under the dim glow of street lamps, and each darkened alley and shuttered storefront served as a silent reminder of how drastically the neighborhood had been altered. The familiar streets, once bustling with the predictable rhythm of everyday life, now seemed imbued with a deeper, almost symbolic significance. Here, amid the changing hues of twilight, the buildings whispered secrets of the day's turmoil, scars, of violence, and the soft imprint of hope that rivaled the bitter taste of cruelty. The air carried a crisp chill, a quiet counterpoint to the internal fire burning within him, intensifying his resolve with every step. As Keanu passed by, weathered, brownstones and neon-lit storefronts, his eyes absorbed the transformed landscape. The corners where chaos had erupted now lay still, yet the tension of the recent past lingered in the flickering reflections on rain-soaked pavement and in the hushed murmurs of late-night passers-by. Brooklyn Heights, in that singular moment, was not just a backdrop but a living tapestry, a neighborhood forever changed by the clash between cruelty and care, violence and redemption. In the solitude of the descending night, Keanu's thoughts gradually began to settle into a quiet clarity. Amid the cacophony of internal memories and the distant murmur of city life, a quiet vow formed in his heart. He promised himself, and silently to Buddy, that this ordeal would not be in vain. He would use this transformative experience as a catalyst for change, to champion the cause of those too vulnerable to defend themselves against injustice. With each step, that promise grew stronger, forging a determination that transcended the personal and reached into the very core of his being. As he neared his hotel, a modest yet welcoming building lit softly by warm interior lights, Keanu paused for a moment under a flickering street lamp. In the glow of that uncertain light, his eyes closed briefly. In that instant, the whirlwind of the day, the painful echoes of cruelty, and the tender moments of rescue coalesced into a single powerful resolution. He vowed to remain steadfast in his pursuit of justice, not only for Buddy, but for every innocent life that had suffered under the shadow of malice. The promise was quiet, intimate, a personal covenant that no matter how dark the path, he would continue to act with honor, compassion, and unwavering resolve. With a deep, steadying breath, Keanu opened his eyes, the vow imprinted upon his soul as he resumed his journey. The transformed neighborhood around him, with its intertwining memories of past hardships and glimmers of hope, served as a poignant reminder that every ending harbored the seeds of a new beginning. And so, with the night enfolding him like a protective cloak, Keanu stepped forward into the promise of tomorrow, committed to upholding his duty, to nurturing hope, and to ensuring that the legacy of this day would be one marked by care, resilience, and a relentless pursuit of justice. As the night slowly surrendered to the promise of a new dawn, the echoes of the day's chaos still reverberated through the quiet corridors of memory. In this reflective epilogue, the journey from an almost serene beginning to a storm of unexpected violence and eventual recovery played out like a surreal cinematic montage. What began as a peaceful, sun-drenched film set in Brooklyn gradually unfolded into a harrowing tapestry of cruelty, one marked by a brutal confrontation, a desperate race against time, and finally, the tender glow of recovery. Every moment, from the heated clash with heartless bikers to the relentless pursuit of justice and healing, wove together into a single, unbreakable narrative that would forever change the lives of those involved. Within that tumult, the emotional and moral journey was as transformative as the events themselves. Justice and responsibility emerged not merely as abstract ideals, but as tangible forces etched deeply in the hearts of all who witnessed them. Keanu's unwavering commitment to safeguarding his loyal companion Buddy became a symbol of a larger truth, that even in the darkest of moments, unexpected bonds can form, forging resilient connections between souls battered by adversity. The day's harrowing episodes underscored that real justice requires both courage and compassion, and that the scars of cruelty can be slowly healed by the tender acts of care and the promise of accountability. In the quiet aftermath, as the relentless hum of recovery filled the clinic, and the night outside whispered tales of lingering turmoil, Keanu found himself immersed in a reflective solitude. His final thoughts were a mixture of bittersweet relief, lingering sorrow, and a burgeoning determination. The thrill of having restored order, and the fleeting satisfaction of seeing the law enforce its due, was tempered by the haunting memories of needless cruelty. He recalled the terrified whimpers of Buddy, the desperate sprint through rain-soaked Brooklyn streets, and the fierce confrontations that now marked the pages of his personal story. Yet, amidst it all, there was also hope. Hope that the wounds, both seen and unseen, could mend with time, care, and unwavering resolve. Offset, Keanu's experience redefined his views on duty and the sanctity of life, particularly when it comes to the vulnerable. The ordeal had underscored a profound truth, that every life, human or animal, deserves the utmost respect and protection. This newfound understanding resonated deeply with him, urging a quieter yet more determined commitment to championing justice in all its forms. Whether on the set of the next blockbuster or navigating the unpredictable avenues of life, he resolved to carry that lesson with him. A lesson that true strength lies in the capacity to rise after being broken and in the humility to know that even a single act of cruelty can ignite a fire of righteousness that refuses to be extinguished. As dawn approached, painting the sky with gentle hues of gold and lavender, Keanu's thoughts turned toward the future, a future that was uncertain, yet brimming with possibility. The day's tragic events had served as both a wake-up call and a call to action. They were a stark reminder that the battle against indifference and cruelty is ongoing, and that each of us holds the power to shape a more compassionate world. His mind, still heavy with the day's emotions, began to formulate plans not just for his personal healing, but for a greater mission. A mission to ensure that the injustice inflicted on Buddy would lead to a broader re-examination of how society treats its most vulnerable. In that quiet, contemplative moment, Keanu made an open-ended promise, a silent vow that would echo long after the final credits of this turbulent chapter. With a determined glint in his eyes and a steady heartbeat, he whispered into the coming light, "This is only the beginning." His words carried an urgent, reflective power, a challenge to every viewer, every passerby, to question, to care, and to take action against the shadows that linger in our midst. And so, as the first light of day broke over Brooklyn Heights, the lingering question hung in the air like a delicate, unyielding call to arms. What will you do when the darkness stirs? And who will you be when justice calls?